Hi, MRK here and welcome to my new video about view models. View models, what are they? Well, view models are basically, as Epic says it, a medium between user interface and user interface backend. So I guess they wanted it to be some kind of subsystem that you can program the user interface in, and the widget itself is just designable without scripting. They say it like that, but it doesn't work like that for me, I guess. So how do I understand view models? Well, for me, view models are a fancy binding system, and that's it. A fancy binding system that replaces our legacy binding system. So let's start, and I'm gonna show you roughly how it works. Of course, first thing first you need to do is opening a plugins tab and typing view models and turning that UMG model on and restarting the engine, and then you are of course good to go. One thing to remember, it's a beta, so it's not gonna disappear, but don't ship projects with it, probably don't do that, maybe. And yeah, let's move on to how you actually use view models. Maybe a little introduction. I'm gonna remind you how the legacy system works. I actually disabled it and I forgot where that is, but I guess editor, widget designer. Yeah, this thing. Let's check to allow. But if you want to use view models, go here to property binding rule and say prevent and warn, and that will disable the legacy system. And the second thing is, give me a moment, I need to find it in the documentation. It's okay, I got it. Let's find model view model binding from detail view. Okay, so that's the legacy system, and let's go to a widget, and maybe it's these two defaults. Our basic setup that we have is just we have a begin play in our HUD class. The HUD class is of course in the game mode, so whenever we start the game, just this fires up, creates a widget, and the widget is on screen. Okay, and in that screen we have health and value. Usually if we have stats, then we want to put them in the game instance, so let's make a health variable called health and type integer, and then in that widget where we want to bind our variable, we just click create binding, and then get GI. You don't have that node, it's a function, but if you don't, then get game instance, of course, cast to your game instance class, and just take health and put it here, but I have this or this in that node, so I'm just gonna use that and put health in the return value. Just convert integer to text, and now we have our value bound. Yeah, so health equals 0, that's the value of health here. If we change it to 10, then it of course changes to 10. Then we can have some kind of tick events. Does game instance have tick? No, I guess it doesn't. So let's just use player for that, and on event tick we want to get GI set health to health plus not multiply, plus of course 1. So just, you know, you see the binding in action, right? So it just every tick it increases. Pretty cool, I guess, but one problem with binding like that is, well, there are two problems I notice, honestly. Just two problems. First problem is that in our widget, if we want to change the preview value, we can't do that from the details panel because it's locked. If we want to change it, let's say health value, we want to call it health value, then yeah, we need to remove that binding, change the value, bind it again, stuff like that. Not too much bothersome, but it's maybe you could allow me to change that value. And the second problem is the optimization. If you have a lot of bindings, then they all run on tick. So whenever the widget runs, the bindings are running, every single tick is just, you know, sets that value. And it's a problem that Viewmodel aims to solve. Viewmodels work in a way where the variable gets updated only when the value changes. So if we had that value, we would use a broadcast to say, hey, that value is updated. Everything that is bound to that value should also update. So that saves some performance. Maybe it's not going to be that noticeable, but if you have a function that is not like that, but like, you know, that. it's a huge function, and you update a lot of things, and it might cause some issues related to performance. Okay, so that's the legacy system. And how do you disable the legacy system? Well, I already told you how to disable it. You just go to project settings, you find that thing, allow binding from detail view, disable that, and go to editor, widget designer, and in property binding you will just set it to prevent and warn. So that means you cannot use legacy binding system, and if you were using legacy binding system before that change, it will warn you that you should not use it. Again, I mean, it's used mainly because of Viewmodel compatibility issues with the binding system. You can run both, kinda, but don't. It's gonna cause problems you don't want. Either use one or the other. So now when you check those two options and go to a widget, now the binding is gone, and you just have to use Viewmodels for that. And yeah, how do you use Viewmodels? First thing first, you need a Viewmodel. So go to wherever you want to make Viewmodels. In my case, I made one in folder called Viewmodels. And to make a Viewmodel, you just go to Blueprint class, find a class called MVVM Viewmodel base, click that, select, and create a class derived from that. I made mine and called it VM stats. In that VM stats, you want to make variables you want to have, right? You want to bind, change, whatever. In my case, let's make just a health stat, type integer, and if you want to use that variable as a notify, so you want to bind to that variable, just check field notify. And you are good to go in the Viewmodel part, well, Viemodel class. Then in the view HUD widget, or whatever widget you want to use the model with, you go to two tabs basically. First, view model is going to be like that when you didn't open view models before, but I just like to pin it right here. In view models, we want to add a view model that this widget will use. So in our case, just add VM stats. It will show here. If it doesn't show, then don't worry, just refresh it, recompile it, and it should show. And now in that view model, we have some options, some creation type options mainly, because view model name is of course not too much important, but the creation type is important. So we have a few: manual, create instance, global view model collection, property path, and resolver, which I don't think is explained in documentation at all. But you can get by using just manual, create instance, and global view model collection. That's three I would use. And if you find some information about resolver, then let me know. And property path is kind of finicky. It's like using CMD a little bit, so I don't like it. I just used manual, first three, right? So what are they? Manual means that the view model is created, but the reference is not set. It's set to null, basically. And it means that the view model should be set later, when you want to use that view model. Create instance is made in mind, like we want to use some variables, but only with that widget, and we don't care about persistence. So let's say we have some interactable objects, right? And we have a widget for that. Then we can, just fetch some things to that model. We don't want it to be persistence. We don't care about that. So we just create an instance, and it will handle everything for us. We don't have to care about assigning it. It will just work. If we want it to be a persistent view model, then we either set it to manual or to global view model collection. And global view model collection is stored in game instance subsystem, made just for that purpose, which means it's basically a game instance. It's persistent, so when we switch levels, the variables have the same value as as we left the level. So maybe let's start from manual. Oh, my something fell off from wall. Doesn't matter. Let's set it to manual, so have some overview on how to assign the view model. And maybe at a later date, later time, not a date, I'm gonna show you the global view model collection. So starting with manual, when you create that widget, you now have a new variable called VM stats, because now we added a view model and we need to set it now. And how do we set that VM stats? From where do we get it? Well, if we are using a global collection, so a game instance one, then we need to create that view model in a game instance. So go to your game instance, and now we don't need that because it's useless for us now. Make a begin play. It's not called begin play in game instance. It's event init, right? And now we want to construct object from class VM stats. Then we want to set it, well, store it as a variable. Let's call it VM stats. And then we want to get MVVM game subsystem, I guess. Yeah, that's what documentation says. And then we get global. I guess not. Why does that not work? Let's type something else maybe. Model collection, get view model collection. Okay, it's now not called get global view model, just get view model collection. Okay, so that's one thing to keep in mind if you are reading documentation that is not updated to 5.3. Okay, ranting again. Now we want to add view model instance and use that view model to add it. Now, of course, we can set a context. For context class we want to set VM stats, and context name is let's just call it VM stats for good measure. And here maybe as well VM stats. Right, so now we created the view model, stored it, and added it to the game instance collection. So now it's persistent, stored in the game instance. We can access it through that variable, or just finding it here. Find model using the context we specified here, or we can also find model, find first model of that class. So just type that VM stats here, and it will find the first model that has that class. So two ways of finding those models, and one way of accessing it from just game instance, which is the easiest one, I guess. Okay, and now that we have a view model, we can go to HUD and use the one of the three techniques I used. I showed you before, or if it's a global instance view model, you can just pick global view model collection and type that identifier here. Right? Yeah, I mean you can also do that, but let's do manual. And if you are using manual, then just get GI, VM stats, get VM stats, and plug it in. And now we have a view model in our widget set as a reference. Very, very nice. Cool. Also, there is a note that you don't need to create widget for some reason. I don't get it. I guess it's a bug in 5.3. Maybe it will be gone in next version. Who knows? Now let's use our view model finally. Now everything is bound, everything is cool. Let's change our value. And now that value, if we don't have it, we don't have that button to bind anything here. Now we have to use the view bindings tab. Let's put it next to view models. And now you can see, and the name will change whenever I select something. So we can basically bind to any element in the widget. We want to bind to health text, text variable though. So here we add widget health text variable binding. Then we need to set a property of that object here. So you can change multiple things like pivot transform, strike brush, slot, whatever, visibility, but we care about text. One thing that is weird is that this is purple, like color of string, but if you pick it and select it, then you know it's a normal text. So I guess just another bug. Then we can select a value, another value we want to bind to or from, because I mean we have multiple directions. We can have multiple directions, but we care about that stats. So just go to VM stats, from the model we bind, get the health, select it, and now we have a direction. So something that is not present in the legacy system. We can have four options. First is one time to widget. So whenever the widget initializes, the health variable from VM stats is just gonna go to the text and update the text just one time. Then don't give, don't care. It just won't matter if we change this or not. Probably useless, but whatever. One way to widget means that whenever health updates, we pass this value to text. Two way means that the text also can pass value to health. So whenever the text widget changes, its value content will get passed to the health variable, which is interesting. And then we of course have one way to view models. So now the health doesn't impact text, but text impacts health. Okay, usually if we want to stick to traditional binding, then we would use one way to widget. And then we have some additional options. If we check this box, the default is immediate. So whenever the value changes, it updates. But we can also check the mode of legacy binding, which is tick. So we don't wait for the value to update. It just on every tick passes the health value to text. And then we have delayed and auto, which I honestly don't really know what they do. I assume delayed would be delayed, but we don't have options for that really. I didn't find it and it's not in the documentation. So I mean, if you know what that does, just let me know in the comments below. Let's just stick to immediate for now, because that's the most efficient way of using the bindings. And now let's see if that works. And a little heads up, it won't, because now if we compile it, then now it says that we can't pass health to text because it's not the same type. And how do we solve it? Of course, with a conversion. In our traditional legacy binding, did I remove it? I guess I did. Okay, so let's just delete it. In our legacy system, we can just get our integer, convert it to text, and pin it to return value. And it kinda is like that here, but you have to pick a proper conversion instead of just have it automated. It could be automated, kinda would be more nice to work with, but oh well, we have conversion functions now. So we pick a proper conversion function. Let's get text and to text integer, because we have health as an integer, so we just want to convert it to text. And in our conversion function, we can bind that value to health. Okay. So now that conversion functions convert the health variable integer to type text, and it should compile fine now. So when we open the level, now health is 0. So okay, that's a lot of errors for some reason. I wonder why that is. Maybe the binding was not unbound, I guess, before, and that causes some issues. Let's see if we can get to the bottom of this. Attempt to assign to none from set health. Oh, I mean, okay, we don't have health in our game instance because we, of course, deleted it, so doesn't matter. On tick we just don't do anything. Let's see other problems. We don't have other problems, so it was just that. The value is 0. If we change it to 10, then of course the value is 10. Now, how do we update those variables? Of course, you can do what I said before, so just mvvm game subsystem find view model, find model. Of course, we need a collection first. So get collection and find the view model instance or instance of type or whatever, or we can just use the stored instance in our game instance. So VM stats, get VM stats, health, set health, and now when we set that health, you see there is a little thingy above it that says with broadcast. That says whenever we set it, it will update. So let's also get health as dual plus 1 and put it to health. And now it just do the same thing we did before. So just every tick update the variable. But of course we don't have to do this on tick. It just updates when the value changes. So if we would say like on begin play, we would have a timer, set timer by event. Let's make a custom event, timer event, right? And we have time 2 looping, and on that timer we want to set, maybe 2 is too much, let's do 1 and put that on a timer. Then it just updates every second, and it now doesn't update on every tick, just whenever it fires. So nice optimization, very cool, very nice. And what's next with view models? We can also bind multiple things to that variable. Of course, in the VM stats, well, maybe not VM stats, in the widget we can of course add a second binding, remove that binding and stuff, and bind to that variable. But the fun thing is that we can also have a different variable called stamina, and in the health we can, well, the stamina of course needs to be a field notify as well. And in our health, we can pick stamina as well. What does that mean? Well, that means that whenever health updates, the stamina will also update, which is quite cool, I guess. Little thing you can do also as a bonus, you can also bind and use functions. So custom functions, you can use those as bindings, but how do you make them? Well, there is a guideline on the documentation page. Let me find it real quick. How do you make those? Okay, so there are 4 conditions that the functions need to comply with if you want to use them as a field notify. So let's call this a custom field notify. And now, we can't mark it as field notify yet. So what do we need to do to make those work? First thing first, it has to be pure. Then we need to mark it constant. Then, of course, it can't take any input variables. And last thing, we need a return value. And for that value, let's pick a stamina. Let's make it called this custom stamina function getter. A mouthful, but whatever, for a tutorial is fine. And plug that stamina to the return value. And now we can mark it as a field notify. So when we go to our widget, we can now, let's make a new binding maybe. Set it to text. And here we can use that function. Quite cool. And that's it. That's pretty much it. That's how you use view models. I think I showed you everything. Just see why this does not work. Could not create binding source property. Stamina does not. Of course, we need a conversion function from float to, or from integer to text. But it generally works. Just do the same thing as here. And yeah, that's a view model. Pretty much how it works and everything that's in it. And what's the biggest problem for me and why I don't use it? Well, the biggest problem for me is the bug that prevents me from using structs. So if we wanted to use struct with like as stats, I guess, and mark it as, let's make a stats structure real quick. Primts struct as stats. And we had some variables like health and stamina. Of course, both are integers. Then stats. I can of course mark this as a field notify, that's not a problem, but when I want to change it, let's say in the third person character, if I were to change as stats, then I can't really do that with set members. And that's the main way of changing structs in Unreal. Alright, so if we mark, let's say, health and set it to whatever, doesn't matter, then this doesn't trigger the broadcast. And if we want to set stats to that, this also doesn't doesn't trigger a broadcast for some reason. So I mean, a few bugs in that, and until they get fixed, I don't think I will be using view models. But I mean, it's a fun tool to play around with. Maybe it will get some cool updates in the future and will be very nice to use. Maybe, I hope it will, because it kinda seems cool. But for now, I prefer the legacy system. I don't know about you guys. Feel free to, of course, test the system, see how it works, if it's useful, if it's nice to work with, and yeah, tell me your experience in the comments below. And that's it from me for today. See you in the next video. Autosave in 5 seconds, and bye bye.